I'll tell you exactly how it started, because I was there. I was standing right by the water dispenser on level 2 of Bridgepoint Unified. That's what we called the school, though its official name after the merger was Bridgepoint Interspecies Preparatory Academy. And I watched the whole thing unfold like a slow-moving disaster you couldn't stop even if you tried. The girl's name was Veth. Or at least that's how we said it. Her real name in her language was something that required 3 different throat positions and a vibration we don't even have a word for in English. Her homeroom teacher, Mr. Castillo, spent the first week trying to pronounce it correctly before Veth quietly told him, through the translation patch she wore on the side of her throat, that Veth was fine. That it didn't bother her, that she was used to people not being able to say it right. She said it the same way people say it's fine when it's not fine at all. She was Quelari. That's the species, the Quelari, from a planet called Quelith, which orbited a pale orange dwarf star about 41 light-years from Earth. They'd been watching us since the 1970s, which was a fun detail that didn't make anyone feel any better about anything. The Quelari were roughly humanoid in shape, but their skin had this soft iridescence like oil on water if the oil were alive. It shifted color with their emotional state. Subtle but visible once you knew what you were looking at. Calm was a kind of cool silver blue. Stress pushed it toward greenish gold. Fear was deep amber. When Veth came through the front doors of Bridgepoint Interspecies Preparatory Academy on the first day of integration year 7, her skin was deep, burning amber. She didn't say a word to anyone. She just rolled in slowly, carefully in her mobility chair, which was Quelari designed and looked nothing like any wheelchair humans use. It didn't have wheels, not exactly. It hovered about 3 centimeters off the ground, powered by a small gravity inversion cell embedded underneath. It adjusted to terrain automatically. It was beautiful engineering, honestly, quiet as breath, smooth as water. She sat in it with her back straight, and her hands folded in her lap, and her iridescent skin doing everything her face refused to do. And I remember thinking, this girl is terrified. The chair was medically necessary. The Quelari, for all their interstellar capability and their 3,000-year civilization and their orbital stations and their quantum-fold ships, they had a biological vulnerability that humans don't have in the same way. Their lower spinal structures, what we loosely call a lumbar region, were extremely sensitive to gravitational variance. Earth's gravity was 0.3 g stronger than Quelith's. For Veth, who had a condition her medical records described as Quelith spinal attenuation, essentially meaning her spinal column's weight-bearing capacity was already at the low end of normal for her species. Earth's gravity was a genuine physical problem. Without the chair, standing for more than a few minutes caused real pain. Walking was possible for short distances with significant discomfort. Anything more than that was off the table. She needed that chair the way someone else needs oxygen. The school knew this. Every teacher knew this. The integration coordinator, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Farah Usman who'd been doing this job since year 2 and had seen every variety of human cruelty toward their new alien classmates, knew this. She had it in Veth's file, highlighted in 3 colors. Didn't matter. Because the school also had Cole Petrick. Cole Petrick was 16 years old, 6 feet tall, and had never in his life encountered a rule he felt applied to him. Not traffic signals, not dress codes, not the unspoken human agreement that you do not make someone's life worse just because you can. He had 2 friends who followed him everywhere. A boy named Dax, who laughed at everything Cole did and never seemed to have a thought of his own, and a girl named Priya who wasn't cruel in the way Cole was cruel but was worse in a different way, because she watched and said nothing and let it happen with a small, entertained smile. They'd been bullying kids at this school since 7th grade. Human kids before the integration. Smaller kids, quieter kids, kids who needed things that made them visible. Cole had a talent, and I mean that word in the most horrible possible way, for identifying what someone needed most and taking it. So when Veth arrived, when Veth rolled through those doors in her hoverchair with her amber-lit skin and her 3-centimeter ground clearance and her obvious, visible need for that device, Cole Petrick noticed. It started small, the way these things always do. A comment in the hallway, something muttered under his breath loud enough for Veth to hear, quiet enough for him to deny. Something about how the integration kids got all the special equipment while human students had to use regular chairs. Something about how it wasn't fair. Dax laughed. Priya smiled. Veth kept rolling. Her skin flickered amber gold. The second day, Cole walked past her chair during lunch period and bumped it. A sharp, deliberate hip check that sent the hoverchair drifting sideways into a table edge. The gravity cell compensated, kept it from tipping, but the lurch was sudden and Veth grabbed the armrests hard. Her tray of food slid. Her drink spilled. Cole didn't break stride. "Sorry," he said, not looking back. "Didn't see it." It's hard to not see a hoverchair. The things glow faintly. They hum at a frequency just below human hearing. They are, objectively, one of the most visible objects in any room. But the lunch monitor on duty that day was a student aide, barely 18 himself, and he looked between Cole's retreating back and Veth's spilled lunch and decided he didn't want the trouble. Wrote nothing down. Did nothing. Veth cleaned up her own tray. Her skin was deep amber for the rest of the afternoon. The third day is when it escalated to what it would become. This is where I have to be precise, because what happened was so specific and so deliberate that I've spent years trying to understand the thought process behind it. What did Cole think would happen? Did he think about it at all? Or was it just the next logical step in a brain that only understood power as the removal of something from someone else? Veth had a locker on level 2, near the science wing. She rolled to it between second and third period, did the combination. The school had fitted her locker with a manual override so she could operate it from her chair, opened it, turned to reach for her tablet. Cole came from behind her. Dax and Priya flanked him, loose, casual, like they were just 3 students walking to class. He reached past her and put both hands on the hover chair's manual overrides, little silver grips on the back frame, designed for emergency control by medical personnel, and pushed. The chair disengaged from Veth. She caught herself on the locker door, fingers gripping the metal edge hard. Her feet hit the floor and she felt it immediately, that press of earth gravity against her spine, too much, wrong, not what her body was built for. She made a sound, not a scream. Something quieter and worse than a scream, a sharp intake of breath, the kind that means the pain arrived without warning. Cole steered the hoverchair down the hallway. Dax jogged ahead and propped the stairwell door open. Cole pushed the chair through, let it go. It floated down the stairwell in slow, confused spirals, the gravity cell trying to compensate for a rider that wasn't there, bumping against the walls, until it settled on level 1. "Oh no," Cole said, turning back toward Veth. "Your chair went that way." He walked off. Priya followed without a word. Dax looked back once, just once, then followed too. Veth was standing at her locker, holding the door. Her skin was the color of deep autumn leaves, not amber anymore, something darker and more complicated. Her jaw was set. Her eyes, Quelari eyes, large and luminous with pupils that dilated horizontally, were looking at the empty hallway where her chair had disappeared. She didn't cry. I want you to know that she didn't cry. She stood there for 4 seconds, maybe 5, and then she started carefully, slowly, painfully making her way toward the stairwell. Because what other option did she have? It took her 11 minutes to get down the stairs and retrieve the chair. By then she was late to third period, pre-galactic physics, a class she was excellent in, and when she rolled in and Mr. Hess asked why she was late, she said she'd been delayed. She didn't say what happened. She didn't name anyone. That's the thing about kids who get targeted like this. They learn very fast that telling an adult is either useless or makes it worse. Veth was smart. She'd probably already calculated the odds. She was right to be cautious. Because when Ms. Usman, the integration coordinator, did eventually learn what had happened, 2 days later, after a different student mentioned it in passing, and she called Cole Petrick into her office and asked him about the chair, he said he hadn't touched it. Said the chair must have malfunctioned. Said maybe the school should file a service request with whatever alien tech company made the thing. Ms. Usman had no footage. The hallway camera near Veth's locker had been damaged. Something had happened to the lens, a scratch that came from nowhere, that nobody noticed until suddenly it was very convenient. She couldn't prove anything. Cole walked out of her office with the slow, satisfied stride of someone who had never once in his life faced a consequence. It became a pattern. Every morning, variations of the same thing. The chair would be somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. On level 3 when Veth was on level 1. Pushed into the bathroom. Once, and this one still makes me feel sick to remember, taken off school grounds entirely, left across the street, floating gently against the exterior wall of the coffee shop where the older kids hung out. Veth had to go to the main office and wait 40 minutes for a security guard to retrieve it. Every time, Cole had an explanation. Every time he had witnesses, Dax and Priya, who corroborated whatever story he told. Every time, Veth said as little as possible and carried the information about what had happened somewhere inside herself, where it accumulated without anyone seeing it. Her skin stayed amber for weeks. She never showed the silver-blue calm that the integration intake documents had listed as her baseline emotional state. I don't think she felt calm, not once, not in 7 weeks. Here's what I want you to understand about Veth before we go further. She was not a passive person. She was not in any sense someone you should mistake for fragile. She was the top student in 3 of her 6 classes. She had tested into the advanced track for xenobiology and comparative planetary physics. She spoke 4 languages, her native Quelari dialect, standard Galactic, and 2 human languages including English, which she'd learned in 14 months to functional fluency. Her written essays were better than most seniors. She designed things. In her spare time, on her tablet, she designed machines, small improvements to existing technology, elegant little solutions to problems she observed. Her integration counselor had found her once, doing calculations for a pressure redistribution system for hoverchair frames that would make them more stable in high-gravity environments. She was solving a problem that affected her own life using nothing but mathematics and determination, and a notebook she carried everywhere. She was 16 years old, 41 light years from home, operating at a gravitational disadvantage, surrounded by people who either actively hurt her or watched it happen. And she was still doing her homework and designing better technology and refusing to break. But she was breaking, just slowly. Just on the inside. The amber in her skin told you, if you knew how to look. Part 2, The Boy Who Noticed. Marcus Delvey Okafor had been at Bridgepoint since 6th grade and had survived his own version of Cole Petrick. A different bully, different years, same fundamental mechanics. He knew what it looked like. He knew the specific way someone holds their shoulders when they're bracing for something bad. He knew the particular quality of silence that follows a cruelty, thick and ashamed, the silence of people who witnessed something and decided it wasn't their problem. He was 17. He was in the cadet track. Bridgepoint had a partnership with an interspecies military preparatory program, part of the broader integration infrastructure. The cadet track wasn't a military track exactly, more like a leadership and crisis response program. It was supposed to produce the first generation of humans who could operate effectively in mixed-species environments. As officers, diplomats, first responders, whatever the future turned out to need. Marcus had joined because he liked the physical training and he was honest enough with himself to admit it. He liked knowing his own limits. He liked pushing past them. He was not a large kid, medium height, built lean, but he was strong in the way that comes from consistent, deliberate effort rather than genetics. He could run for a long time. He could carry heavy things. He'd been trained in Quelari emergency medical protocols, because the cadet track trained you in the emergency protocols of every species currently enrolled at the school. He knew about spinal attenuation. He knew what it meant. He'd watched Cole take Veth's chair 3 times before he got close enough to see her face during it. Not her skin. He didn't know yet how to read the color shifts, but her face. The way she breathed. The way her hands moved. The 3rd time, Cole and Dax had taken the chair to the athletic wing, which was on level 3 and required going through a corridor that wasn't on Veth's standard route. She had no reason to go there. It was out of the way, and she'd have to navigate stairs or the elevator, which had been under maintenance for 2 days, to even get to that level. Marcus found her outside the elevator, which had a paper sign taped to the door that said out of service in permanent marker. Veth was sitting on the floor. She'd lowered herself carefully, controlled, a deliberate choice, with her back against the wall and her tablet in her lap and her notebook open. Like she was just doing homework. Like the floor was a completely reasonable place to work. Her skin was the color of amber glass, held up to a light. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there for a second, looking at the situation. Then he said, "Is the elevator actually broken, or did someone put that sign there?" She looked up at him. Those large, horizontally pupilled eyes assessed him with a directness that he'd later describe as the most honest gaze he'd ever been on the receiving end of. Not suspicious, not afraid, just honest, gathering information. "I don't know," she said in her slightly formal English. "I didn't check." He walked to the elevator and pulled the paper sign off, pressed the button. The doors opened immediately. Veth watched this happen. "Where is your chair?" he asked. "Level 3, athletic wing." He nodded once, like this information landed somewhere specific in him, and he processed it and filed it away. "I'll go get it." "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "Be back in a few minutes." He went. He found the chair in the athletic wing, floating next to a row of lockers where someone had jammed the manual brake, a small lever that, when pressed, disengaged the gravity cell and locked the chair in place. It was a Quelari hover chair. It required knowing where the lever was to brake it like that. Someone had looked it up. He released the brake, took the chair back down in the elevator, rolled it out to where Veth was still sitting on the floor with her notebook. She stood slowly, carefully, with that controlled movement that wasn't weakness but management, and settled into the chair. She adjusted the armrest positions without looking at them, muscle memory from years of use. "Thank you," she said. "They did this yesterday too," Marcus said, "and Thursday." It wasn't a question. She looked at him. "Cole Petrick," he said. Still not a question. "You are in the cadet track," she said. "Yeah." "They teach you emergency response protocols for Quelari medical situations." "Yeah." "Then you know what spinal attenuation means." "Yeah." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Then you know why that," she paused, chose her word carefully, "matters more than just the inconvenience." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry it's happening." She looked away. "Everyone is sorry. That is not the same as it stopping." He didn't have an answer for that, because she was right, and he knew she was right, and saying anything that softened it would have been a kind of insult. So he just said, "Yeah, I know." And then he walked her to her next class. Not dramatically, not as a gesture, just walking beside her the way you walk beside someone at her pace without making anything of it. She didn't thank him again. She just went to class. He went to his. Part 3. What BUILDS underneath. The next day, Marcus was in the hallway near Veth's locker between 2nd and 3rd period. He wasn't obvious about it. He was at the water dispenser, which is where I usually was, and we nodded at each other the way you nod at someone you know but don't need to have a whole conversation with. Veth rolled to her locker at her usual time. Cole appeared at his usual time, with Dax and Priya in their usual positions. But this time, Marcus didn't look away. Cole reached for the hover chair's back frame. Marcus said, "Hey, Cole." It was 2 words, normal volume, completely calm. Cole stopped. He looked over at Marcus. Dax looked at Marcus. Priya's small smile became something more careful. "What?" Cole said. "Don't touch it," Marcus said. "Just that." Cole looked at him for a moment. Cole was bigger than Marcus, and he knew it, and he did that thing that bullies do where they let the size difference speak for itself before they bother with words. "You got something to say to me," Cole said. "I just said it," Marcus said. Cole looked between Marcus and Veth and back at Marcus. He did a quick calculation, the same calculation bullies always do, which is not about right and wrong but about audience and consequence. There were maybe 12 students visible in this hallway right now. The nearest teacher was around the corner, possibly. "Mind your own business," Cole said. And then, because he wanted to, because he was Cole Petrick and he'd never once not done what he wanted, he reached past Veth again toward the chair's frame. Marcus moved, not violently, not dramatically. He just crossed the distance between himself and Cole in 3 steps and put himself between Cole and the chair. He was facing Cole, back to Veth, close enough that Cole would have to push him to get to the chair. Cole stopped. Because this was different. This had a body in it now. A body that wasn't Veth's body, which Cole had apparently calculated was acceptable to push around, but a body belonging to someone who was looking at him with no particular expression, no anger, no fear, just a kind of flat clarity that said, "This is where I am standing and I will keep standing here." "Move," Cole said. "No," Marcus said. There was a beat, one of those beats that feels much longer than it is. The hallway had gotten quieter. People were watching. Cole made a small noise, somewhere between a laugh and something that wasn't quite a laugh, and backed off. He didn't leave. He just backed off enough to be technically not in Veth's space anymore, and then he looked at Marcus with the expression of someone who is filing information away for later use. "All right, man," Cole said. "All right." He walked away. Dax followed. Priya looked at Marcus with something complicated in her expression, not guilt, exactly, but something adjacent to it, and then followed too. Marcus stepped back. Veth had her locker open. She was getting her tablet. She was doing it the same way she always did it, with the same precise movements, except now her skin had shifted, still amber, but lighter. Something moving toward silver at the edges of her shoulders and forearms. She didn't look at Marcus. "You'll need to do that every day now," she said quietly, "or he'll just wait until you're not here." "I know," Marcus said. "You don't have to." "I know," he said again. She looked at him then sideways, as she closed her locker. "Why?" she asked. Simple question, real question, not asking for a speech, asking for the actual answer. He thought about it for a second. Then he said, "Because it's wrong and I can stop it, and those 2 things together are enough." She looked at him for a moment longer. Her skin was silver blue at the shoulders, just at the edges, just for a moment. Then she rolled to class. It didn't stop. Of course it didn't stop. Cole Petrick wasn't the kind of person who got told no one time and decided to change his behavior. He adapted. He got smarter about it, doing it when Marcus wasn't around, doing it in less visible places, doing it in ways that were harder to call out. He got Dax and Priya involved in a more coordinated way. Dax would find Marcus and start a conversation, about nothing, about everything, just long enough, while Cole slipped through a different route to wherever Veth was. It worked twice before Marcus figured out the pattern. After that he started checking in with Veth more regularly. He built himself into her daily routine the same way the targeting had been built into it, with consistency, with timing, with an understanding of where she'd be and when. She noticed. One day at lunch, she ate in the integration section, a corner of the cafeteria that had been set aside for non-human students and their self-selected human companions, which mostly meant Marcus and one other student, a quiet girl named Sona who'd been sitting with Veth since week 2 for her own reasons that she never explained to anyone. Veth put her fork down and looked at him. "You've memorized my schedule," she said. "Yeah." That's a level of attention that, she paused, chose the word, unsettles me. "Fair," he said, "but it's not the same kind of attention." "I know," she said, "I know the difference." She was quiet for a moment. It's still strange to have someone, another pause, watching out. "I haven't had that in a long time." He didn't ask what she meant by a long time. He filed it away. They started talking, properly talking, not just logistical exchanges about the chair situation but actual conversation, the kind that happens when two people discover they're interested in the same kind of thinking. She was fascinated by Earth history, not the broad strokes, she'd learned those before integration, the specific parts, the contradictions, the way humans had spent thousands of years building systems designed to hurt each other and then, periodically, had produced individuals who stood in front of those systems and said no. "You do this repeatedly," she told him one afternoon, sitting in the courtyard, "as a species. You build the problem and then you produce people who resist it, over and over. It seems inefficient." "It is," he said. "But the resistance," she said, "is also remarkable in the scope of what we've observed. Other species, when they build systems of cruelty, the cruelty tends to stabilize. It becomes the norm. It calcifies. Humans are," she tilted her head, "unstable in both directions." "That's probably the kindest way anyone has described us," he said. She made a sound that he'd come to recognize as the Quelari equivalent of a dry laugh, a short exhalation through the nose, barely audible. "I don't mean it as kindness," she said. "It's observation, but observation can be kind sometimes." Her skin in the afternoon sunlight was the softest silver he'd seen it. He told her things too, about his family, his mom, who was a nurse and had been working double shifts since his dad relocated to the orbital station for work, which meant Marcus had been the functional adult in their apartment for 2 years. About his younger sister Amara, who was 9, and had decided that Quelari were the coolest thing that had ever happened to humanity, and had strong opinions about which species she was going to befriend when she got to Bridgepoint. About why he'd joined the cadet track, partly the physical training, partly because he'd read once a paper about the first generation of humans who'd serve in Galactic Council operations and thought, somewhere in a quiet part of himself, "That should be someone like me." "Someone like you," Veth said. "What does that mean?" "Someone who pays attention," he said, "to what's actually happening, not what's supposed to be happening, what is." She considered that. "That is rarer than you think," she said. Part 4, the day it broke open. Week 7, a Tuesday. The school had its annual integration showcase, an event designed to demonstrate the academic progress of non-human students and their human counterparts, put together so that parents, district officials, and a handful of Galactic Council observers could walk through and feel good about how the integration was going. There was a lot of pressure on this event. The integration program was politically contested, both on Earth and, Marcus had learned from Veth, on Quelith and the other participating worlds. There were factions who thought it was moving too fast, and factions who thought it was moving too slow, and nobody who thought it was going exactly right. Veth had been selected to present her xenobiology project, a comparative study of gravity differential plant growth across 3 worlds, using a miniaturized greenhouse system she'd built herself with school equipment, was exactly the kind of thing the showcase was designed to exhibit. Smart, impressive, mixed human-alien knowledge application. She'd spent weeks on it. The design was meticulous. The data was real. She was, underneath her careful composure, genuinely proud of it. The showcase ran from midday to late afternoon in the main atrium. Students had stations. Veth's was in the center section, visible, prominent, a good location. I was there. I was helping with the technology setup because I was in the AV crew that year, so I had a bird's-eye view of most of what happened. The Galactic Council observers arrived at noon, 2 Quellari, an Androvac, and a human liaison. The human parents and district officials filled in after. The main atrium was full within 20 minutes. Noise and bodies and the particular smell of an official event that's trying to look casual. Veth was at her station, explaining her greenhouse system to a Quellari observer and 2 district parents. Her skin was calm silver. She was in her element, talking about the thing she'd made, in the language she'd learned, in a world that was too heavy for her, at a table in the center of a room that suddenly seemed to matter. And Cole Petrick walked past her station at 12:47. I saw it happen. I was up on the AV platform, and I had the whole atrium laid out below me, and I saw Cole and Dax moving through the crowd with that specific quality of purpose they had when they were about to do something. I knew what I was looking at. Cole reached Veth's station from the back, the side that faced away from the Galactic Council observers, toward a temporary wall partition. Veth was facing the other direction, talking. He came from her blind spot. He reached the chair. He pushed it out from behind her, a hard, deliberate shove that sent it sliding across the smooth atrium floor. The gravity cell engaged and slowed it down, but it still moved 6 feet before stopping. The chair had drifted away from its user in the middle of the integration showcase in front of every person who was supposed to see how well the integration was going. Veth didn't have the door to hold this time. She had her table and she caught the edge of it hard. The Quellari observer turned toward her immediately, alarmed. The district parents looked around. People nearest to the incident began to notice. Veth held the table. She didn't fall. She was good at not falling by now. But her knees were bent, and her spine was carrying weight it wasn't designed to carry, and her face was the face of someone in genuine, real pain, who was refusing to let it show in front of the most important audience of her academic year. Her skin, visible on her hands, her forearms, her neck, went the darkest amber I had ever seen. Not just amber, something close to red. I came down off the platform before I even consciously decided to. I was moving across the atrium. I don't know exactly what I was going to do when Marcus appeared. He came from across the room. I don't know if he'd seen it from his position or if he just knew from 7 weeks of watching, of timing, of paying the kind of attention that the cadet track had refined, but that he'd started with before any training. He just knew that this was happening now. He moved through the crowd without rushing, without shoving, without drama. He reached the chair, stopped its drift, turned it around and brought it back. But here's the thing. Here's the moment that became the moment. Not because it was the biggest thing, but because of exactly how it happened and who was watching. The chair was back by Veth now, positioned behind her, but Veth was still holding the table. She was managing her weight distribution carefully, and the shift back to the chair required her to let go of the table and turn and lower herself, and the distance, even a few feet, was going to require movement that would hurt. She was calculating it. You could see her doing it, assessing the angle, the distance, the amount of weight transfer required. And Marcus, without saying anything, without making it a thing, without looking around at the audience or playing to the moment, just moved. He came around to her side. He said something to her quietly, just a few words. She looked at him. Some brief exchange happened, a question, a nod, whatever passed between 2 people who had built enough trust over 7 weeks to communicate in shorthand. And then he put one arm under her shoulders and one arm under her knees, and he picked her up. Not with difficulty, not with drama. He just picked her up, the way you carry someone with steadiness and care, the specific carry of someone who had studied Quellari emergency support protocols and knew exactly how to distribute the weight, how to minimize spinal strain, how to make it feel like safety rather than helplessness. And he carried her the 3 steps to the chair, lowered her into it gently, made sure she was settled, stepped back. That was it, that was the whole thing. But the whole room had stopped. The Galactic Council observers, the district officials, the parents, the students. All of them had seen, at varying levels of comprehension, a human boy look at an alien girl in pain and do something about it. Not dramatically, not performatively, just do it. One of the Quellari observers, she was the senior one, older, with skin markings that indicated council rank, made a sound. A Quellari sound, not translatable directly into English, but the human liaison next to her startled slightly at it and looked at her face and then looked at Marcus. The senior observer's skin was the deep, complex color of something I can only describe as moved. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I learned later. Cole Petrick was still standing 10 feet away. He hadn't run. He hadn't tried to pretend it wasn't him. Maybe he'd calculated that in a room this full, with this many witnesses, running would look worse. Maybe he just froze. Maybe something in what he just watched made him momentarily incapable of the small movements of self-preservation. He was standing there when Ms. Usman reached him. She'd been 2 stations over when it happened. She'd turned at the right moment. She'd seen his hands on the chair frame. She said his name. And in the middle of the integration showcase, in front of the Galactic Council and the district officials, and the parents of every student at Bridgepoint Interspecies Preparatory Academy, Cole Petrick had no explanation.